Here's what the Bible says the king dreamed. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, and its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. Suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar was excited. That's it, Daniel. I can't believe it. That's exactly what I dreamed. It was a giant statue made of different metals. It had a golden head and silver arms and brass thighs and iron legs and clay feet. And then a giant rock flew out of the sky and smashed it to pieces. But what in all the world does it mean? You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. The golden head of the statue represents Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian Empire. It was the greatest of empires, the most decadent, literally drenched in luxury and gold, the head of all empires. But it didn't last forever. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. History tells us that the Babylonian Empire crumbled when the Medes and Persians sacked the city in 539 BC. And it didn't matter that they weren't as talented on the battlefield as the Babylonians, because an unseen hand tipped the scales in their favor. Wherever God steers history, that's where it's going to go. And he has a very specific destination in mind. The Medes and Persians, represented by the chest and arms of silver, ruled the Middle East until 331 BC, when another army destroyed them. Then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. The third kingdom, represented by the belly and thighs of brass, was the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, one of the greatest military geniuses of all time. Alexander managed to conquer on foot 20 million subjects in over 3 million square kilometers in something like 4 years, all by the time he was 32 years old. He was completely unstoppable because he had the unseen hand of God allowing him to win. But Alexander too came to an end in 168 BC. That's when the Fourth Empire destroyed them, as the Bible predicted in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Now, if you remember your school history classes, you already know which empire humbled the Greeks. It was the Romans, of course, the same empire that ruled the world when Jesus Christ was born. They were more ferocious than any army the world had ever seen, and they literally stomped all over Europe and the Middle East, subjecting everything in their path.
We're not recording.
This is a dream that don't, except for the king, nobody else. Yes.
Absolutely, what we're told is that the king had this dream and has told no one.
Okay, therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Bring me before the king, and I will give him the interpretation." Arioch hastily brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who will tell the king the interpretation. The king responded to Daniel, whose name was
Belteshazzar.
Are you able to tell me what I saw in the dream as well as its interpretation? Daniel answered the king, no wise man, enchanter, medium, or magician can explain to the king the mystery of which he inquires. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the later days. Your dream and the visions that came into your mind as you lay on your bed were these. As you lay on your bed, O king, your thoughts turn to the future, and the revealer of mysteries made known to you what will happen. And to me, this mystery has been revealed, not because I have more wisdom than any man alive, but in order that the interpretation might be made known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. As you, O king, were watching, a great statue appeared. A great and dazzling statue stood before you, and its form was awesome. The head of the statue was pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were part iron and part clay. As you watched, a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were shattered and became like chaff on the threshing floor in summer. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation.
So quickly, and I don't want to, bog down. It's hard on reading this stuff. But the first thing Daniel does is he goes before Nebuchadnezzar and he says, your guys were right. There's no human that can reveal this to you, but there is a God in heaven. So that's the first thing he starts with. And he says, he revealed it to me, not because I'm so wise, not because, it's me, but he revealed it so that you would understand what's going on, so that you'd have an understanding. He says, what he's told you, this dream you've had, is about what we would call the end times, the latter days. Olam Hayamim is a real specific meaning of these latter days. So anyways, as he revealed it to me so that you would have the answer to it. This dream, this magnificent, imposing statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, thighs of bronze, and then the legs of iron. And then the feet, of course, are a mixture of iron and clay, which you understand can't really be mixed together. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar is astounded. So you're the real deal. You actually knew the dream. Now, what does it mean? Because that doesn't tell me anything. Let me, before we go further, prophecy is a tough thing. And I know I talked to a lot of people over the years, and we get told this is a prophecy. And mere mortals like you and me hear what they say and go, I don't see it. I don't know what you're talking about. To me, that doesn't tell me anything. I don't get it, what you're getting at. And people take things and turn them, say they're prophecy, and they look at interpretations and they go, that meant this. So one of the big things we need to get out of this study is about prophecy itself. All right. And I'm going to tell you a story. Charlie, are you still here?
Yes, he is.
All right. You're a fisherman. You'll understand this, but hopefully the rest of you will. I floundered most of my young life. You go out for flounder, you have a light and you spear them. They're laying on the bottom and they blend in to the sand. And you look, and all of a sudden, you spear them. But we'd go out, and we always started too early. And it's a part of the story, believe me. We'd start a little early too much light, and we'd be stabbing everything. You know, there's a shadow, there's a shell, there's a whatever, there's stuff, and you'd stick things because you can't really make them out. And then all of a sudden, and usually when it's darker, you actually see a flounder. And I remember my friend, this friend making a comment one time, everything looks like a flounder until you actually see a flounder. Once you actually see one, you realize how stupid you were for thinking all those other things were. They're nothing like this. The way of prophecy is that often people, they always want to show how smart they are and come up with, this is what this prophecy means. And if you go out, as we do, and read all these commentaries, they're hundreds of this means this, and all the other people they don't get it. Unfulfilled prophecy is worse than looking for flounder and stabbing at stuff. I mean, but once you actually see the real thing, it all of a sudden becomes much more obvious, and you go, oh, wait a second, that's what that meant. This is a prophecy given to Nebuchadnezzar. And as we study, there are things about that. There's this one, and actually David has these visions, these dreams that run parallel. They're virtually the same thing. And you're going to see some truly amazing, this prophecy is one of the most amazing things, this sort of combined Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel prophecy. You will see some prophecies that I don't have any problem looking at that and going, oh yeah, no, I know what that means. We all know what that means. So,
and because of that, that's why some people try to poke holes in things and say this was written after the fact, and it couldn't have been written that far after the fact.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the weeds on why it couldn't have been, but there are several places in here. If I went through the whole thing and I bored you all, but you'd go, oh yeah, that couldn't have been done after the fact. So
okay,
anyway.
So the interpretation. So now we are, where am I? Verse 36. This was a dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given sovereignty, power, strength, and glory. Wherever the sons of men or beasts of the field or birds of the air dwell, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. But after you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, for iron shatters and crushes all things. And like iron that crushes all things, it will shatter and crush all the others. And just as you saw that the feet and toes were made partly of fired clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet some of the strength of iron will be in it, just as you saw, the iron mixed with clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the people will mix with one another, but will not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will shatter all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself stand forever. And just as you saw a stone being cut out of the mountain without human hands, and it shattered the iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold, so the great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy.
So obviously, even though strangely there are people who argue about this, he says these are four kingdoms. You're the first one. You're the head of gold. And people say,
Can I put up that one thing while we talk now?
Do you think we can?
Just the picture, I think I can.
Okay.
Yes, so this here, this one?
Yep.
Share. Okay, just a sec. 1, 2, there. Okay, so you should be able to see, you can see it. They're nodding their head.
Okay, so on the left, on the right is actually Daniel's version of this, and we'll get to that later. But on the left, here is this image, this statue, if you will, but it's an image of a man, and the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, and then finally these legs and feet of iron, and the feet of iron mixed with clay. I want to show you the video. It does just a really good job of it, but you can see what.
So start with that.
So he says 4 kingdoms, and all the histories of Babylon. You know, 2 of the, I think, the ancient wonders of the ancient world were in Babylon, and people said there was more gold there. They covered things in gold. There was more gold than you can imagine. It was a fabulous, almost decadent sort of place. And so he says these are 4 kingdoms, and you're the head of gold. Your kingdom is the first one, but after your kingdom, another kingdom is going to arise, and it's going to be less splendid, but at the same time harder, stronger than yours. He does mention that Nebuchadnezzar, you know, we see the harshness of he's going to have all these people killed, but it seems that he is somehow favored by God. And so, you know, I mean, we're told that he's probably not that bad of a guy taking these people captive, but he treats them well. Anyway, the second kingdom,
all it says about it, there will rise another kingdom inferior to yours.
Inferior to yours. So he's giving Nebuchadnezzar an explanation of things that are going to come to pass, because we have later on this dream that Daniel has. We know for sure, because it tells us later that the second one is an empire they call the Medes and the Persians, the Medo-Persian Empire. And we get some pretty amazing details about them. And then after that's going to come another one, even less splendid.
Because bronze is less splendid than?
Nonetheless harder. And bronze, actually, when you think about weapons, it was for a long time the cream of the crop. So it's hard enough to make weapons out of. They're going to be less splendid, but harder and fiercer. And then finally comes the legs of iron. And I think most people that are not just being obstinate still understand that's Rome. Rome is less splendid, but Rome is hard.
So let me read from verse 40 again, because this interpretation, like I said, we're going
Let's
to
go back to our thing. They can see this.
Okay. It says, finally, there will be a 4th kingdom as strong as iron, for iron shatters and crushes all things. And like iron that crushes all things, it will shatter and crush all the others. And just as you saw, the feet and toes were made partly of fired clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet some of the strength of iron will be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with clay. And that the toes and the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the people will mix with one another, but will not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay.
That's a pretty good description of all of these empires. It's a pretty good description of Rome. They're, first of all, a divided empire. Well, they were. And we'll have to talk about the rest of them later. Nonetheless, here's this. Nebuchadnezzar is amazed. First, you gave me this, and then you give me this interpretation.
Then the final part of of his dream that's important is this rock that comes out, the stone being cut out of the mountain without human hands.
Jesus is referred to as a stone any number of times. Mashiach is prophesied, but they talk about a stone numerous times, not cut out by human hands. You know, there you go. I mean, not made by the normal process. I think it's pretty obvious. We're
So it's not another man-made kingdom.
It's not a man-made kingdom, and it says it's going to be one that's made by God, and it will last. No one else is gonna replace it. And I don't want to go too deep on this until we get to the other ones. You see the outline of what he's been told. I think it's and Nebuchadnezzar is obviously he's amazed at this.
Well, and there's only 2 more verses. So at this, King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, paid homage to Daniel, and ordered that an offering of incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Your God is truly the God of gods, the Lord of kings, the revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief administrator over the wise men of Babylon. And at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon while Daniel remained in the king's court.
I guess it's worth noting, I'm absolutely convinced these Chaldeans, these wise men of this area, are part of the same group that are referred to as Magi. And you remember that some of them came, reading the signs, came when Jesus was born. Daniel gets put in charge of this group of wise men. And you have to know that this boy who wouldn't eat the food given to him because it was not, it was defiled, it was not clean. You have to know he had some impact. He had some influence over this society of wise men. And I would not be at all surprised if some of the things that he taught wound up being in the written lore that causes those Magi to travel to Jerusalem when Jesus is born.
500 years
500 years later. And I think it's to me, it's without question. You begin to see in this things tie together. You begin to see relationships in things that are pretty amazing.
So we're going to skip ahead. Yes, question.
I was gonna just ask, does this mean that Nebuchadnezzar started believing in one single God?
No, not really. I wish, not really.
We'll find out.
But-
That didn't
but-
work out so well. for him.
And this is often the, go ahead, let finish your question.
Well, no, I mean, he said, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, so does that mean he's gonna put God above his gods and still worship his gods? And
Well, for the moment, he sees the value in as no, you're really not. I mean, it's a really good question. We as humans have a tendency to say, "What have you done for me lately?" And so this pantheistic approach is sort of hard, and we're going to see it actually in the next chapter, but we're going to skip past it for now. Not exactly, but he does acknowledge, and when he says, Daniel actually says back in there, he calls him, I think, the revealer of all things, talking about God. Sometimes John does this in the beginning of his gospel. He says, in the beginning was the Logos. The Logos is a Greek concept. And so he teaches in terms that people will understand. And as of this moment, Daniel is talking to Nebuchadnezzar in terms that Nebuchadnezzar would understand. So what Nebuchadnezzar, and we know this because of later story, what Nebuchadnezzar picks up on is, well, okay, you've only got one, but he's pretty good. Yeah. Good question.
So we're gonna move to, yes, Jeff.
Isn't Babylon not, when we think of a nation state now, we think of a very central organized state, but wasn't Nebuchadnezzar basically the ruler over different kind of provinces, and there was different allegiances, so that to declare that there's only one God and there's no other gods would be, I would imagine, political suicide at the time, because he was having to balance all these different sort of factions within his
Yeah, and I am just so tired of politics. But yes, indeed, it is the political thing. If you watch the second week of Jesus' trials, I've got some pretty good information about this, but you can't rule an empire over, the entire Mediterranean and up into all these areas and out to the east in Afghanistan. You can't rule that much area by leaving soldiers behind, because nobody's got that many soldiers. And so you leave them some of their own ways and you try and infiltrate the culture. Yeah. And so for him to stand up and say there's only one and it's not yours, would probably be a political problem. Yes, that's a very practical approach, but yes, that's true.
We're going to move to Daniel 7. Like I said, Daniel 1 through 6 is history, and we'll go back to history. We're going to fast forward. Daniel is now in his early 60s. So we left him when he was 16. We're going to fast forward to his first prophecy. Do you want to read the beginning of Daniel 7?
Sure. In the first year of the reign of Belshazzar over Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he lay in his bed. He wrote down the dream, and this is the summary of the account.
Okay, so notice this is a different king. Nebuchadnezzar is dead. Daniel is now in his 60s, and he has a dream.
Yeah, he's a 16-year-old boy the first time he interprets. Now he's in his 60s. So Daniel has his own vision. In my vision in the night, I looked, and suddenly 4 winds of the heaven were churning up the great sea. Then 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, each one different from the others.
And I'm gonna share the screen so they can see this while we do it. 'Cause it's
Okay.
just share the screen. There we go.
So the one on the left was obviously Nebuchadnezzar's dream. This one on the right is Daniel's. And they were 4 beasts, each one different. The first beast was like a lion and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, given the mind of a man. Suddenly, another beast appeared, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. So it was told, "Get up and gorge yourself on flesh." Next, as I watched, another beast appeared, which was like a leopard, and on its back had 4 wings like those of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After this, as I watched in my vision of the night, suddenly a 4th beast appeared, and it was terrifying, dreadful, and extremely strong, with large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, then it trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the other beasts before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like those of a man and a mouth that spoke words of arrogance. So you see the pictures, they've seen it now. Let's click back. I like to see people.
Sorry.
Prophecy, as I said, is a difficult thing. The purpose, and so what's the purpose in prophecy? Why are we even given this? Just so we can foretell the future, so that someone can foretell the future. And I'm going to give you a quick, Uncle Scott version of this, but people use prophecy for all kinds of just the wrong thing. And they want to show off how good they are at figuring stuff out. And, this is prophecy tells us, and this one actually, when we get down to the end, in the end, God is sovereign. I've seen the end of the story, God wins. It was never really in question. Prophecy gives us the ability, when I look at this, and I see some of this about Babylon and about the Medes and Persians and all this, as they unfold, notice it takes time. If you get a prophecy, you don't know often in your lifetime how it comes out. And yet we, with the ability to look at it, can say, oh, well, okay, I see this, it was true, and it means that the other things that I'm told are true. And we can live without fear, we can live without worry. It serves a purpose.
That God wins.
That God, in the end, God wins. It's okay. These things are larger and longer than our lifetimes, and yet we see the truth of them. Trying to turn them into anything else. And here's one other thing. There's some that we can just like the flounder, you don't know until you see it. And people sit around and waste large portions of their lives trying to figure and predict. Don't try and predict. Don't try and predict. Just don't try and predict. It's not our place. We can look at things and we can go, okay, some of the rest of this appears to be in the future. And you can have confidence in because you see what's come before, and it serves a purpose for us. And so each one of these kingdoms, Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar saw it two different visions, and yet they're clearly the same thing. The first beast we already know has to be Nebuchadnezzar, because we're told Nebuchadnezzar was the golden, the head of the statue. We know that. The second one is sort of a two-parter, and it says that it was lifted up on one side. And the truth is, the Persians were the dominant. They call it the Medes and the Persians. The Medes were not very significant, and the Persians wind up taking dominance, and they sort of drag this Mede bunch around. But if you look at how it worked out, it's not hard to look at this and know with clarity that this is the Medes and the Persians. There's in 8, you're actually going to see it spelled out. That's what makes this sort of cool, why we want to do this all together. Because even now, if you think I'm speculating, wait till we get to 8 and you're going to go, oh, well, no, it just kind of actually says that, doesn't it? Yes, it actually says that. But you can look at the prophecy also and understand that.
Should I read the vision of the days?
Not yet. No,
Okay.
let's not just yet. Unfulfilled prophecy, this end time stuff. I don't participate in like predictions on this stuff, but I will tell you another story. When I was young, I grew up in a church that frowned on things like drinking and smoking. Okay, that's enough clue. And there was I thought he was ancient. I don't know how old he was, but he was old. And he had been smoking since he was 8, he told me. And in between Sunday school and church, he's having a nicotine fit. He would always go outside and stand around the corner of the building. And me, being who I am, would go out and talk to him. Nobody else would. He's sort of ostracized. And we don't really talk about the smoking man, but I did. And one of the things he taught me was about this prophecy stuff. And because at the time that Left Behind series had just come out and people were just obsessed with it. Oh, this is the end of time. This is it. It's going to happen like right now. Within a year, it's all over with. And he told me, look, don't ever be like that. They thought for certain that Julius Caesar was the Antichrist and that was the end of time. And then later, they thought people like Hitler, they were certain, and they go down the list and they go, look, he checks this box, he checks this box, he checks this box. It's Adolf Hitler. There's a point in Revelation where it talks about this Antichrist as having been wounded in the head, and then he comes back, almost like he comes back to life, and people are amazed at it. It's one of the reasons they follow him. There are people who actually say that that's John F. Kennedy, because he got shot and they froze him and they're going to bring him back and all this stuff. And they do this and they waste their life making predictions. Everything looks like a flounder until you see a flounder. And everything looks like fulfilled prophecy until you actually see prophecy fulfilled. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, no, that's different, isn't it? This idea of the Medes, the Babylon, the Medes and Persians, these Greeks. And the Greeks, believe me, when we start talking about the Greeks, I told you, you need to go watch the second week of Jesus' trial, because that Greek Empire figures into it in an amazing way. And it's predicted in uncanny accuracy in the next chapter. There's some things about it that are just still to me are shocking. But I talk about it and have been talking about it in terms of how it led up to Jesus in that time. But it's here. It was all the way back 500 years before. And the prophecy is perfect. Now you want to talk about the Ancient of Days? This one is, you want to read it? You want me to?
I will. Okay, so verse 9 on chapter 7. As I continued to watch, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from his presence. Thousands upon thousands attended him, and myriads upon myriads stood before him. The court was convened, and the books were open. Then I kept watching because of the arrogant words the horn was speaking. As I continued to watch, the beast was slain. The body was destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was removed, but they were granted an extension of life for a season and a time.
All right. That's good enough for now because we're running out of time.
Okay.
I'll make the conclusion of today. There's more to come. This part is clearly this end time prophecy. This is in the future for them and for us. When Nebuchadnezzar got his, it was all in the future for him. Most of it is in the past for us, but this part is clearly in the future, even for us. I'm not going to spend any time speculating about it other than to tell you that it's good to know that this thing didn't all take place, this prophecy didn't all take place like all at once. It unfolded over hundreds of years, and part of it is still unfulfilled.
I'm going to read 13 and 14 just to finish that, and then it's a bitter stopping place. In my vision in the night, I continued to watch, and I saw one like the Son of Man coming from the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence, and he was given dominion, glory, and kingship, that the people of every nation and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And then we interpret the dreams tomorrow. Okay.
What I was going to say, these beasts rise up out of the sea. In this context, in the context of prophecy, the sea almost always when it's described like this, is the world of politics. And so this is a political thing, these kingdoms. One other thing I'll mention, when Daniel tells about God, he says or he's actually making that sort of psalm, that he knows, he sees what's in the darkness. And there's a different word. We say darkness, but it absolutely, the word that's used there is a spiritual darkness. And so, we see a combination of the two worlds. We see the physical world, we see the spiritual world. I can tell you a little bit about it. And then the rest of it, I'm just going to tell you, I don't know. I'm not going to predict the future. It's not going to happen. I never do it. And my recommendation is that if you start like reading the Left Behind series and people are predicting the future, you're going to waste a whole lot of your time. It's not meant for that. The prophecies that as they unfold are meant to give us confidence in what we believe. So
the one of the videos we couldn't see, if you don't watch anything this week, if you can go on and look at the video, because it shows it's a really good video presentation of the man with those different sections.
I'll have it out there. God, sometimes we're confused. You obviously know things that we don't know, and we maybe part of the point is that we learn to accept that we learn to understand our place in this, and yet we see the truth of you around us. We see it in the people that you give us, that you put into our lives. We see it in lives changed. The prophecies, we somehow, when we read these things, we begin to understand how inadequate we are. And so I guess my prayer, what I'm asking, is that we learn from it the humility, the humbleness of being able to look at you and say, it's enough that you know. We don't, but it's enough that you do. We thank you that you actually take a hand in this world and recognize that you take a hand in our lives, and that's enough. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. So next week we will finish 7 and do 8, and then we'll go back to 3. Okay, you guys can unmute yourselves. Thanks.
I thought Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist. It was like 666. His first name was Ronald, 6 letters. Middle name was 6 letters. That's what I
You're
heard.
not the only one.
Yeah,
People do it.
yeah,
They try-
Let's not get
I'm not saying it was. I'm saying that's what I heard.
No,
somebody
no,
say.
no.
Yeah, no, that's right.
No, people did parse that, and they try and take those numbers. You got 5 seconds? Can I tell you something about it? 3, you all know 3 is always associated with God and with perfection, right? 6 is usually associated with man and imperfection. And so 6, man, repeated 3 times, I'm convinced that is man representing himself as God. That is man trying to be God. It is nothing more complex. It doesn't give us the name of the Antichrist. It is a thing that spans thousands of years, and it reaches a point though where man has the power to make human monkey embryo hybrids, which came out this week. But it's man representing himself as God. Anybody starts trying to tell you that you predict the name of the person that's going to be by the numbers, just
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Thank y'all.
Bye. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.